Welcome to the What Happens Next YouTube channel. What we're aiming to do with this channel is share content designed to make sure that you're supported through whatever's next in your life. And we'd love to continue to do that. I've got a favour to ask today, and what I'd ask you to do is just subscribe. It costs you nothing, but it really helps us deliver really good quality content on a consistent basis. Thank you, and let's go on to the interview. Welcome to What Happens Next, the channel designed to help you, if you're in your 50s and 60s and thinking about the next chapter of your life, what that actually means and how to navigate it in the best way possible. Because my experience as a chartered financial planner working with clients for many years is that, yes, the money is one point. The money and knowing we've got enough is an important subject to think about, tackle, and understand. But there's so much more when we think about the change we're going to make in our 50s and 60s that we need to consider. And that's why I'm really pleased today to have the amazing Sam Javed on today.
Thank you.
To talk to us about that. Sam, how's your week going so far?
Yeah, it's going fine. It's it's raining today, but that's okay. I've got a neighbor. He's Italian, and the point of conversation is always the weather.
Okay.
Whoever you talk to, and you just think to yourself, like, why am I so surprised it's raining? Like, how many days, 363 days of the year it's raining, and the couple of days we get some sunshine, we get a bit complacent.
I know. And it's a British thing. I mean, I'm surprised your Italian neighbour does it, because it feels like a really British thing to talk about the rain, doesn't it?
But Chris, it's such a point of conversation, because we have like 5 seasons in a day, and they spread out differently over the course of the week. But yeah, that's why we do it. That's why we do it.
I always find it really funny because I cycle to work normally. I'm working from home today. This is my home office, but I cycle to work normally. And I thought cycled all through the winter when the weather wasn't that great, and thought, right, spring's coming. I'm going to really enjoy the experience of cycling to work. And then I realised I live in the UK. And there's no guarantee on anything. Let's be honest. It's it's probably going to be either too hot or too cold or something. Anyway, I'm really pleased you've come on today, Sam, to share your insight and expertise. For those, I know you, we've known each other for a long time, but for those in our community and our audience who don't know you, tell us a little bit about you.
So essentially, I am a wellbeing and personal development practitioner. I've been doing that for a number of years. I started off my journey originally doing my psychology degree. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so ended up doing a lot of grassroots community-based stuff, and spent several years working to address health and educational inequality. And when I came out of that, I developed a lot of skills and experience to be able to offer training. And that's how I moved into my freelance business. And one of those first training contracts was, delivering training to doctors, police officers, frontline workers who were looking for better engagement strategies in working with young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, so people maybe from gangs and things like that, just to raise awareness. So that's where it's all started, really. So I've always had that element of compassion towards people and doing better. So gradually, as my freelance experience increased, I did more and more work with different organizations, not just community organizations, different corporate organizations, in community settings, different settings. Essentially, it turned into actually soft skills training in the end, because confidence, it was almost like an organic and quite a natural progression in terms of confidence building, presentation skills. And that came up to about around COVID. And essentially I thought, well, what do I do now? I've got a lot of skills working with people from different backgrounds. I've got lots of freelance experience, but during that experience, what did happen was I was working, because I was working as a freelancer, I was networking a lot of businesses. And so I was already having a lot of interaction with entrepreneurs, small businesses. So essentially I decided to do an additional qualification, my master's in positive psychology and coaching psychology. And that's essentially what I've gone on to do now. And that's why I work as a coach and trainer, focusing now on wellbeing and personal development.
Amazing. Love that. Tell me a little bit about engagement with how to better engage with the people around us, because it sounds like earlier in your career you were training and helping people to do that. So what did that look like? How do we better engage with the humans around us?
I think, I think it comes to, first and foremost, I mean, there's several reasons, but off the top of my head, I think firstly having an unconditional positive regard, which essentially is having a non-judgmental attitude towards other people fundamentally, Chris. I mean, we've all got our unconscious biases to some extent that we're all trying to work through. But I think it's having that element of compassion for somebody without judging them for their mistakes. And I think engagement starts at the core. So, and then obviously, I think after that, it's about treating them as an equal. I don't think I'm better than any of the people that I work with. And in fact, that I learn a lot from my clients and the people that I've worked with over the years.
Sure.
So I think it's about coming from a place of compassion, having that non-judgmental attitude, working as equals. So creating that process.
Yeah.
Working in collaboration with each other and listening.
Yeah, that unconditional positive regard's really interesting, because I've got a friend who always uses the phrase, all we're doing is the best with what we've learned, what we've got up to the point today, right? So it's that element of removal of judgment and often removal of ego is the difficult thing. But yeah, that's really, really interesting. Talk to me a little bit about so you've talked about where you are in your journey and where you've got to now. Talk to me a bit more specifically about the work you do. Tell me a story that helps describe the work you do with clients.
Okay, so if we're looking at coaching, so it's working essentially one-on-one with somebody to help them be able to achieve their goals. Okay, so and the way that could be done with clients is through a positive psychology coaching approach, which is essentially understanding, which is essentially the science behind what helps humans to flourish, what is going to support them in their journey. And once you understand that, you can really do that through I went to the University of East London, which is one of the few brilliant universities for this subject, because there's only a handful in the world that do it at the moment. But essentially it's using a coaching style that can really support them achieve their goals and essentially where they want to go, really.
I suppose the interesting thing for the clients we're trying to help with what happens next is their goals are fundamentally changing, because they're at that crossroads in life where they're thinking about what's going to happen in the next 20 to 30 years as they go into this third chapter. How can you help people get clearer on their goals? Or I suppose the question that I want to ask Sam is, how do you help somebody achieve their goals if they're not clear on what their goals are, because they're in this state of transition?
I mean, there's different techniques you can use. Okay. Approaches, because there's just so much out there, but it is ultimately going to depend on the needs of the client, who they are, their learning style, how do they learn best, is it through visual techniques? So all of those things are important. So essentially what you do, the approach that you use is going to have to adapt to the needs of the client. And essentially the way to do that, I think fundamentally what I found really helpful is it's almost putting it all to the side and going back to essentially what their key values are. I found, at least in my experience, because values are those fundamental drivers in terms of what we do, the judgments we have, the decisions we make, the attitudes, our belief systems. And I often feel, in terms of the people that I've worked with, once we get clear on what those values are. I mean, things change all the time for human beings in general. So essentially going back to what your core values are, what you see for yourself, and how can we help you navigate that journey.
And it's what's really interesting for me, and we talk about this on What Happens Next, and in my financial planning business of Allo all of the time. Values transcend job title, don't they? They transcend identity to a certain extent, and you can look at your values and go, well, that I could apply that to whatever's next, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me about a process that you really love that helps people get closer to their values.
A process that I love. Well, one of the things that I mean, I've spoken about this before. I mean, in terms of my research that I've discussed and I've shared with you and I've shared out there, but essentially it was using photographs, I think, fashion, to elicit information. So essentially using resources to help people connect better, giving them something more tangible rather than abstract, to be able to gain clarity around things that are important to them. So I would use a similar process. So the research I know that I've discussed with you, and you were a little bit, I think, unclear about the photos element of it. But essentially for the research that I produced and which was subsequently published, I combined well-being, interventions. So I asked participants to spend a week taking up to about 12 pictures of things that they connected with, okay, within their local environment. After that week, I asked them to narrow it down to a few, and I interviewed them through some semi-structured interviews. So there was a guided conversation in that process with the pictures that they'd selected. Okay, so there was already a connection there, because what we found was that there was an inherent connection to the things that they connected with and the things that they took pictures of.
Interesting.
So it wasn't random. So it wasn't random.
Give me an example of the sort of things they were taking photos of.
I'll give you an example. I've got the research here because it was just literally incredible. So I've got it here, right? And through the research, Chris, we found that there were different themes that came through that. Okay, so different things that were coming out. So one of them, the pictures were enabling them to be reflective. Okay, and more specifically, they were able to derive a metaphor for life in some cases. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example here. Okay, so I want to get right. So participant A also related their strengths to the metaphor in their picture, which depicted a mountain with a road leading to it. In quotation, you never quite know where the road's going. It's winding. There's loads of opportunities, and you've got to enjoy the journey as much as you have to enjoy the destination.
Interesting.
That's what the picture says to me. And that's essentially the sort of themes that were coming out. And they were quite powerful.
Yeah.
Going back to your questions, in understanding somebody's values, you could use literally resources like photographs that they've taken. I mean, lots of practitioners I know have a treasure chest of resources that they can use and pull out. Visual aid cards. It doesn't have to be photographs, but essentially just connect back with key values, maybe using methods like photographs. Just I found them to be so powerful. But again, it would depend on the person, their learning needs, their learning style, and what works for them.
And it's, I mean, that visual element, it's really funny. So Charlotte's, my oldest daughter, is back from university at the minute. And we were talking about when we did a trip a couple of years ago, 3 years ago in 2022, where we toured Europe. And we were just looking back at the pictures we had from the journey. And it was really interesting how evocative the memories were just through looking at that images and talking about the experiences we shared. It's really interesting. I did a What Happens Next video the other day, Sam, on the work of Elizabeth Dunn, right, the author of Happy Money and psychologist, and talking about the memories her research says that spending money on experiences is far better than spending money on stuff, because we get the anticipation of the experience, we get the enjoyment of the experience, and then we get the memories that come through it. But it's interesting how you've got like the power of that visual reminder coming back and saying, look, this was really important and this is what you've got from it. I love that. Absolutely love that.
I think also the caveat to that is not all experiences will necessarily work for everyone. Just because not all, you might have a fantastic coach or a fantastic therapist or a fantastic practitioner that you work with, but they're not necessarily going to be able to work effectively with everybody.
Sure.
And I think that depends on a number, and that the reason for that is a number of things, including, are there any potential blocks there? Are they? Is it the right sort of intervention or activity to be doing with them? So there's a whole host of things, but I think try everything. I mean, I'm a big believer. I think similar to you. You read widely, try different, opportunities, just to almost not even necessarily. I mean, I was looking at the London Buddhist Centre, and they've got a course that somebody told me about around loss and grief, around change, navigating change, and that. They said it was a really powerful program. So it was just about looking at what is out there, exploring, and just opening your mind.
You know what? Really strangely, and I'm going to lean over and show you the book that I've just finished reading. Right. So I'm coming back. I've just finished reading a book on Buddhism, bizarrely. That was the book that I finished yesterday. And I agree with you. I as philosophy goes, I probably lean into more stoic learnings than anything else. That's probably where I sit best. But and what's fascinating is how many overlaps there are in that ancient wisdom and the modern day research we know today. That's always insightful for me. But reading widely and experimenting and thinking about these things from different perspectives, I know it helps me think about these things in a bit more of a nuanced way. And their life is nuanced, isn't it? It's not black and white. It's about understanding what works for us. But that's a really interesting question, because I know that I've had a lot of conversations with my clients about the benefits of working with a coach as they transition into the next chapter of their life. And you really fairly mentioned that not every coach works for every client. So I suppose the interesting thing for me is, how do you know you've found the right coach for you?
It depends on what your priorities are, what you want from a coach, and that's going to vary from person to person. I think it's certainly what I would say, if somebody is looking for a coach, because anybody can call themselves anything, Chris, in this day and age, and I think it has ethical consequences, because essentially when you're working with somebody that you are they almost, if you look at it, you cannot exploit them in any way, and you have to safeguard their interests. And that's why, if you are looking for a coach, first and foremost, just make sure that they're reputable, credible, that they've got the necessary qualifications in being able to support you through that coaching process. I mean, it's guys, you work one-on-one and we're equals, but equally, it's just making sure that they have got ethical boundaries in place. And that maybe, I'm a member of the British Psychological Society, so I adhere to their, code of conduct. I think that, Chris, that's really, really, I know you're part of, you're regulated as well. So equally, how important it is. Otherwise, anybody can say anything.
Yeah. And certainly I'm really grateful that my level of qualification, being chartered, helps me sort of think about that in a different way. But certainly finding somebody who's really done the work to be ready to help you, I think is really fair. Because actually, in my world, as a financial planner, we can't trade unless we're regulated. Whereas the coaching world is a bit more open, isn't it? It's like anybody can put their hands up and say, I'm a coach. But yeah, it's really interesting. I love your website, by the way. I was doing my research before this interview, and the 3 things that you talk about: unlocking potential, living authentically, and thriving with purpose, really float my boat. But what I was really curious about is how you take somebody on a journey to do those 3 things in their life really practically. Help me understand a bit more about that.
So it goes back to what we were saying earlier on, and I think this relates as well to the people in terms of the age range that you work with.
Yeah.
Essentially, in this day and age, I mean, I was speaking to a local shopkeeper who retired recently, and it was one of their family members said this is his 3rd retirement.
You know what, Sam? Casey's dad's retired about 4 times. Literally, every time he stops, he goes back.
Yeah, so that ties in almost, regardless of what we're living in a completely new time. Age is not as much of a factor as it used to be maybe back in the day where you just thought that was it.
But here's the thing. I'm questioning whether that concept of retirement is good for us.
Yeah.
Do you think that perception that we just stop at a particular age, is that counterintuitive to what the positive psychology says about thriving? Do we need purpose? And do we actually need, because I think about work in my life, and actually a lot of it is about serving others. Yeah. And we know that the positive psychology says that that's good for us, right?
I mean, my personal response to that would be fundamentally the term retirement has been something that we've inherited based on the country within the national agenda. So essentially you work for a period of a number of years, which seems to be going higher and higher each year. And then after that, that's where you stop working from a 9 to 5 conventionally. And that's when you can start, I don't know, go around pot the garden or whatever. You know what I mean?
Who does that suit, that agenda? Because you think about it, and I think it suits the large industrial employers. Absolutely. Who actually want people to come in and replace. Yeah. I don't know whether it suits the individuals. Absolutely. I might be wrong, but that perspective on it is an interesting.
I mean, Chris, I think structure, personally speaking, I think structure is really important. Purpose is incredibly important, and meaning to your life and the value, the contribution you have to make as a person is fundamental.
Yeah.
How well to our well-being, and how well we go from surviving to thriving almost. But I think people now, especially in recent years, especially since COVID, there's been this resurgence of people evaluating what is important to them.
Yeah.
Questioning a lot of things, and when we see that now, we see more people maybe moving abroad, having career changes. There's more people that are lots more people that are purpose-driven content creators now, right? So we've seen a change, and I think there is a change that has come since COVID, where people suddenly there's more to life. We saw a lot of loss, and there was a lot to process, and I don't know if we've actually really processed it, because certainly I know in this country, we just get up and go to work conventionally. That's that thing. Yeah. You're back up. We don't have time to really process what actually happened and what we experienced.
I think it's really interesting, because I think the idea of what happens next is to allow us think. I think part of my mission is to have conversations that maybe people think, to question what they're doing every day in, day out, and that with more intention, and say, is this really working for me? But you raised a really interesting point, Sam, that I want to explore. You talked about surviving and thriving. Help me understand what the difference is, and how do you know whether you're surviving or thriving?
I think, again, it's going to be based on the individual. So in some cases, with the people that I've worked with, survival for them is being able to pay the bills.
Yeah.
Right? making sure that they can pay their electricity, making sure that, you know, they're fundamentally able to support themselves.
Economic survival, right? Just making
Yeah.
sure that they can live day to day.
Almost the Maslow's hierarchy of need, the absolute essentials at that, at that scale. And essentially being able to work towards thriving is building on that. So, okay, I've worked towards covering my essential bills. What more can I do? What is it that I want to do? Who do I see myself wanting to be? Who do I want to be, 5 years from now? And working from there and working almost backwards and not starting from where we are, but first starting from
with the end in mind, right? Yeah.
What do you need to do now to achieve that?
Yeah.
And the process.
Is survival a mindset?
Oh God. What do you think?
I think there are people who are really struggling out there, and survival isn't a mindset; it's a reality.
Yeah.
But I also have some really interesting conversations with people who aren't practically in a survival environment, but their head tells them they are. And I'd be fascinated in terms of your experience.
I would agree that survival is a real reality for a lot of people out there at the moment, especially in terms of the cost of living and the way the economy and the political environment is. However, as well, I completely agree with you. Is there an opportunity to reframe that way you're thinking?
Yeah,
I'm not saying that, I've worked with people and often people say, positive psychology, sometimes people think it's all about positivity and no, it's actually not. It's having a look at what we can do that will support our well-being and mental and emotional well-being, that's going to allow us to flourish and do better. And that, I think, involves reframing some of the circumstances that we're going through and that's going to enable us to eventually thrive.
I love that. And it's that element where regardless of what challenges we've got, there might be just an incremental step forward we can make.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's more empowering, Chris. It's more 100%. Empowering, and people, I found, feel better for it as well. That it's not about thinking, everything is going to be fine and there's going to be, sunshine and roses. That's not. However, you can feel more empowered by that experience. You're more likely to take action. But that's
positive action moving forward.
At the same time, I think it's important as well to allow people to navigate and work through that process to come to that.
I love that. Help me understand. I've been thinking a lot about because helping somebody achieve their goals is brilliant. I think that's a really important step to take. And I love the books on positive. Martin Seligman's book, I've probably mispronounced that. It's Thrive, isn't it? I read that, funny enough, while I was traveling in Europe and absolutely loved it. How do we become happier today? So if we're thinking about now, what can we do to, because for me, gratitude's really important because I know I'm really lucky. So what other steps, apart from gratitude, can we take to realise how lucky we are today and hopefully improve our well-being immediately?
You hit the nail on the head. Gratitude is fundamentally one of the most important things, that there is always somebody out there that is less fortunate than where we are. We only have to turn on the news to see that. So I think keeping that perspective is incredibly important and empowering, and also embedding gratitude strategies into our everyday lives. We have this almost negativity bias where we're almost prone towards negative thinking for survival. That's how we have evolved. But now what we can do is become more conscious and mindful of the way our mind body works, and try to start almost reframing those experiences and incorporating and developing resources that are more likely to empower us through methods such as being more grateful, aligning more with our values, even if it's something that we can't do in our day-to-day work, Chris. what else can I do that's going to engage with my values? So, for example, if they're creative, can I do an evening workshop? What are the small steps that you can take right now to create a more healthier, positive outcome for yourself?
Love that. I love that. And we talk a little bit on I'd say we talk, I'm writing about it in the What Happens Next book at the minute, doing things that feel certain well-being needs in our lives. So I'll give you a perfect example. We down the road from us, we went on a date day, Katsy and I, we painted mugs, supporting a local cafe who do this creative stuff. And actually, that element of creating something, spending time with somebody I love, but also supporting a local community business, filled multiple well-being pots. And I really like the idea of like stacking well-being. So doing something that fills 2 or 3 of those pots at the same time. And it's something I've been thinking about quite a lot. Help me understand, because we've talked about getting a coach who's done the work academically or done the learning to get to a point where they're qualified to help and they're talking to you about stuff that's really backed in the science. Tell me about your academic journey and why psychology and positive psychology was the route you took.
Oh gosh, I think I just fell into it almost and naturally. I think I applied for a course years ago when I was a lot younger, and I didn't get onto the course, and I thought, oh, I gave him my resignation, and then I thought I've got to choose something else. And then I went to this was years ago, and I went to a careers advisor, and I thought, oh, psychology, yeah, that's a bit of me. So I did the course, and yeah, fundamentally it made sense inherently, just understanding understanding and learning and seeing the world in a different way. So
what was the fundamental change in looking at the world from that original course for you?
Yeah, that was really important. It enhanced my way of looking at the world, I'd say, and that was back in about 2008. So I did my psychology degree at University of East London. Interestingly, the year that I graduated, which was about 2008, was I think around the same time that they brought out the positive psychology and coaching psychology course, Chris. And I left. So I'd always heard about the course and, through alumni, newsletter. Yeah. And I'd always thought, well, that sounds like a bit of me. And then what happened is I did a short contract at UEL. And Andrea, who was the course director at the time, she did a bit on positive psychology for staff. And I thought, no, this was it. So when COVID hit and I had that time to kind of reflect about what I wanted to do, I thought that is it. It was almost a natural progression of who I am, what I want to learn, and how I can contribute.
I love that. Yes. Love that. What's the one thing that they teach in the positive psychology masters that you completed that isn't as openly shared publicly as it should be?
I'll tell you what comes to mind, and I think you spoke about it earlier on. I think are you talking about from a course structure point of view, or are you talking about
what do they teach in the course, Sam, that we could practically apply it to our lives but isn't common knowledge?
Oh gosh, so what could you literally apply to your own lives? I think, oh gosh, because I was going to answer that differently from what I thought you meant. I tell you what I was thinking. So we spoke earlier on about there being several coaches in the world. Now, what I learned is actually that, so imagine you get a YouTube coach or, a personal training coach, and all these people have got incredible roles, but it's actually really different. And a lot of people that I've spoken to about this are really surprised by this. It's actually really different to being an actual coach.
Yeah.
So
we
do not guide the conversation. People assume that we're going to be coached and given lots of information to enable us to do what we need to do. It's not like that, Chris. It's a technique, it's a style of communication and engaging with the other person that's going to enable them to achieve what they want to achieve, essentially, and supporting them through that process. And sometimes that involves techniques like summarizing or, you know, asking questions. So we actually don't talk conventionally a lot of that time, contrary to what people think coaching is, because that term in itself.
But here's the interesting thing: that word coach is now used for everything, including roles that are all about teaching a specific skill, right? So, like, if you take a YouTube coach, for example, what they're doing is teaching you how to succeed on YouTube, not helping you work out what you want from your life. And they are two fundamentally different questions.
And it's more like a mentoring, which is totally respectable. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's about understanding what is it that you want from somebody that you're working with or going forward. And I think one of the things that I would also suggest, if you haven't got a coach, I really find asking myself questions when I'm not sure about things or how to navigate a journey really helps. So that's one of the tools that people can take away. Obviously, it doesn't substitute a coach professionally, but you can certainly ask yourself series of questions if you're wanting to take a certain route, you know.
And what questions do you ask yourself that you find are the most impactful?
What is it that you want to achieve ultimately by this route? How is it going to serve? So imagine now I've said within 5 years' time I'll do X, Y, and Z. Right. Will the decision that I'm looking to take support and enable me to achieve that or not? Is it congruent to my core values? Is the decision that I'm taking? Chris, I did this exercise myself just last week. I redid my list of values. I grouped them together. And fundamentally, I think that's who I've always been in terms of the key groups. I don't think they've changed for me, Chris. Because that's who I am as a person at the core. And when I looked at some of the decisions and jobs and roles that I've done and, you know, decisions that I've made in my life, the ones that didn't work out were fundamentally incongruent.
Misaligned.
Values.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. And so I just think that whatever you're looking to achieve in terms of who you want to be, who you are, you know, and ask yourself serious questions in that journey. And you know, that I think, I
love that. One other question that I didn't prepare you for, Sam, but I'm going to ask anyway, because it's along the lines of asking yourself the right questions or getting a coach, is I've increasingly seen a lot of people use AI as a thought partner in certain areas of their life. And I look at that and think the challenge that I've got, and I might be wrong because there's people who know a lot more about this stuff than me. The challenge that I've got is AI doesn't, at the minute, bring the emotional intelligence you want from that coaching conversation. But is it a tool that people should consider using when they're thinking about the next stage of their life? What are the pros and what might be the cons?
I think fundamentally you cannot replace AI with a human being who is a qualified, experienced, you know, coach, therapist, or practitioner. You know, we feed a lot of this information into AI in order for them to generate that information. So in that sense, we are still leading the way as, you know, coaches and practitioners. So fundamentally, a coach or therapist, the human being should never be replaced, because fundamentally, as a practitioner, especially as a coaching practitioner, there's fundamentally things that you offer as a human being that AI that generated information cannot, Chris, replace. That being able to hold another human being, allowing them space, metaphorically, right? You're supporting them in that journey. AI cannot give you that psychological safety.
Yeah. That's really important. Yeah.
Doesn't always get it right. And so putting your life in the hands of a machine that, you know, is still very much within the early age, is especially, like, you know, any age, can never face, that human interaction, the nuance cannot be, interpreted by AI.
But this is the interesting thing, isn't it, Sam? I think in our world, and certainly in yours, holding space for somebody, giving somebody that psychological safety to, because we've got a relationship of trust with that client, is often what they pay for and what they're looking for.
Absolutely.
I've got clients who are AI experts, and I'm really curious about why they choose to work with me, who are quite expensive in terms of what we do. And they say,
and you're a human being, Chris.
What they tell me, Sam, and I might, like, I'm just paraphrasing them, is they want a relationship of trust, and actually building relationships of trust with fellow humans is a lot easier than with a really super intelligent and sophisticated AI, but not in the same way. And I think that psychological safety point you raise is really good.
Yeah, and that's just things. We could go on and discuss the disadvantages of that for ages, I think. But equally, I can understand that the advantages in able to clarify your thinking, maybe by patterns. So almost using it as a tool like that could aid the process. But there's no way I would recommend ethically as well that you use AI.
Well, the challenge you've got as well is that hallucination element at this point, haven't you? It just sometimes says things that just patently are true. So, but yeah, it's an interesting one. I've been thinking a lot about the difference between happiness and well-being. And I'd really love to know from your perspective as a coaching professional what you see that difference being.
I think it depends fundamentally. It's such a subjective term, isn't it? Because happiness means something different. I'll be honest with you, Chris, to people from different backgrounds, different cultures, it means something different to everybody. Happiness the way that I view it is that it's an emotion that is could be fleeting, short term, and it comes and goes.
Yeah.
Whereas well-being, it's a state of mental, emotional, physical aspects that are nurtured and supported, okay, to allow you to flourish in all of those ways.
Yeah. No, I love that.
I mean, happiness, like I said, it depends on cultures. I mean, if you spoke to my mum years ago, I mean, happiness to her, if you asked her what was happiness, it would be more inclined to be grateful from first, being an immigrant into this country, the way that they survived and lived, Chris. And she says to me sometimes the cold in those winters of struggle, she said, you can still feel it in your bones even after all these years.
Yeah.
Happiness to her would be closely in line with gratitude and reflection. So I think it depends and it matters to what our view of the world is and the priority we give.
And I think happiness for me is a transient state, right? It's not permanent. We go through periods in our lives where we're happier and we're not. So that, I think that aspiration for permanent happiness is nonsense, frankly, because we're not always going to be happy all of the time. What I'm interested in, Sam, from your background, what did you learn most about because I think about values and often I come back to what my mum and dad taught me. So what did you learn from your mum having that journey as an immigrant coming into the UK? I'm fascinated to know.
What did I learn?
Yeah.
Oh, resilience, Chris. Resilience. The way to interact with the world. I think fundamentally everything I've learned, who I am, is a culmination of both my parents. We strive in a way that our parents lived a very different life from originally in their countries, and they came here to give their children a better chance at life, but also contribute and set up a new home for themselves and contribute to the environment around them. And I learned so much, Chris. Everything I feel that I am, my parents 100%. Like if you ever met them, the conversation and everything is definitely me. So I think what I learned from them is resilience, and I think fundamentally being a good human being, having a human conscience. I think fundamentally, and that's
kindness, isn't it? It's
kind.
yeah. And Sam, this is why you and I get on so well, because I share that value too. Help me. So a lot of the people watching this, a lot of the people who are part of the What Happens Next community are either approaching a time where they're thinking about changing their life, and that might have been conventionally called retirement, or it might be whatever happens next in their chapter of life. And I've been talking about this with both, other professionals and clients quite a lot. That comes with an element of loss and grief, because what a lot of people are doing is, yes, they're losing their income from work, and they're moving on to this next stage where that income might not be guaranteed. They're losing their identity, and they're losing often a bit of their purpose. How do we navigate that period of time when there might be loss, there might be grief, and there's definitely change?
I think all of those things, and I think it's particularly paramount at that age due to all the things that you've mentioned, because of the change in work and the change of lifestyle. Because prior to that, even though we have to do with change throughout all our lives and milestones, which also incorporate those factors, at that particular time, it's I suppose a bigger milestone. And I think it's not even just maybe a loss. I think you mentioned loss a lot of times there, of identity and all these things, but it's an opportunity to almost reflect back and look at all the accomplishments, all the things that have been achieved. And yes, it is a process of where you're moving from one stage of your life to another, but it's equally an opportunity to reinvent yourself, Chris, and really reevaluate your life in a different way.
I love Sam. I love the way you reframe that. That it's not loss; it's reinvention. So, what question would you ask a client who was going through this transition about to support them in this period of reinvention?
Gosh. What would you like this next phase of your life to look like? I'd go back to basics. Let's have all the things that you can now do to start this next chapter of your life.
Love that. Yeah. What are you looking forward to? Is the interesting one, isn't it? I love that.
And also, if it is, what is it that you want to create? Because essentially you've done the work, you've been working for years, you've got the money. It's a different way of looking at the world. And how can I contribute differently? Maybe be of service if that's what they want to do. How can I create if a legacy is what they want to create, what does that look like? What mark do I want to leave on the world?
Yeah, I love that question. What mark do I want to leave on the world? Because often when I'm having conversations with clients, that's not about the money. That's about the positive. And actually, my mindset's changed on that over the years. When I first started, it was about survival and making sure the business works. And I think it evolves when it comes to that, because then you turn around and go, what positive impact is the work that I'm doing making? It's really interesting. Now, I'm a massive fan of stories. So tell me a story that best describes the positive impact of the work you do.
Gosh. I worked with probably one of the most profound ones. A few years ago, I was given some work to do some training around assertiveness, and it was through a group it was in a community setting, so it wasn't a corporate setting, it was a community-based setting, and it was my way of giving back as well. Like that's fundamentally always has to be an element of my work, where I'm contributing to people from different backgrounds and different communities. And Chris, I was working in this community setting, and it's for this charity, and I worked with this group of women that were refugees in this country. and they were displaced essentially because of the wars, civil wars in their own countries, and they were highly educated, and often people are like, in comparison, they had PhDs, Chris, and everything, and you're just in awe, in awe of them. And essentially I work with one particular lady actually, and she had HIV, and at the end of, I worked on this program with them, and at the end of the program, she told me actually, and I got renewed funding for the training I was delivering. She told me that it had completely helped her redefine her experience and the way that she defined herself. And that was really powerful to me, because that is more than money, Chris.
Yeah.
To positively impact somebody's life, reframe the way they've seen a certain experience that they are likely going to have to navigate for the rest of their lives. However, you've empowered them to still be able to go on a journey. She went on to find more work that she was more closely aligned with, and that was one of the testimonials that I actually got back from the company, and I think I'll always take that away with me.
I love that. And it sounds like you're really keen on making a positive impact in the world, as I am. It's something that's important to us both. I think the interesting thing with that is, and I've been thinking about this a lot, often we define ourselves by the stories we tell ourselves, right, about the world. How do we tell ourselves better stories about ourselves, the world, that allows us to thrive?
Yeah. So I think essentially go back, do some self-reflection, incorporate that if you can on a daily basis, where you just have some time maybe for the meditation. And I think because when you give space to your mind, it actually allows you, it gives space, literally it gives some space for other things to come up and for you to be able to work towards, and you allow that, you invite those experiences in. But what I would suggest is give yourself some space. Remind me of the question.
So if we're defined quite a lot by the stories we tell ourselves, how do we tell ourselves better stories?
So go back, give yourself some space. It will allow for you to have the space to reflect back and just understand if there's specific areas, for example, relationships, love, or our career, and have a look at what it is. Try and give yourself the room and the space to think about what you are telling yourself about those. What are some of the beliefs that you actually have in relation to that? Now, if those experiences haven't necessarily been positive, Chris, in certain areas, what are the underlying reasons for that? What could be some of the beliefs that we hold? Okay. Yeah. And once you try to, when you start to understand what you tell yourself about a certain experience, okay, you can then say, right, okay, just because things like, okay, that's my experience today. What are the ways that I can reframe that experience?
Yeah, it's interesting, because there is a big dialogue about post-traumatic growth as well as post-traumatic. Sorry, I've lost the phrase now. It's post-traumatic growth, but post-traumatic injury, effectively. And that always interests me, because how do two people who might have shared a similar sort of experience just look at it in different ways and have different psychological, feelings about it? It's interesting.
And yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's why resources, and again I have to caveat that with, it's just not all positive. I might say, look, you can resource it and you can feel better, but I've got lived experience. I've been on my own journeys. We all have, Chris.
Yeah.
We've all been on journeys within our lives, and we've been able to develop certain resources which have either disempowered us or empowered us.
And
fundamentally, those resources that I've spoken about, that are evidence-based, that are psychologically safe and validated, can enable you to process and maneuver various situations to support you better, and be able to live lives accordingly in a way that you want, as opposed to being disempowered.
Love that. Where can members of our community and our audience find more about you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, So you can, obviously, I'll reshare this video, of course, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can email me info@thehouseofwellness.uk. I'm on TikTok, but I don't think much of the people.
You know what? We were talking in the office, Sam, about TikTok, and we were trying. The conversation yesterday went a bit strange because we were trying to persuade Russ to go on TikTok with a hula hoop, and he wouldn't do it because we thought that TikTok audiences might want something different. Like they might not want nuanced conversations about navigating change. They might just want Russ in a hula hoop. But yeah, how do you find TikTok as a channel to talk about your work?
Oh gosh, Chris, you know, I think conventionally, I'm on most of the social media channels, but for me, visually, in terms of video content, I think it's a genius platform for creation.
Yeah, interesting.
Chris, I have seen people of all ages, of all background. They have this innate creative talent, which has been brought to the forefront through TikTok. Whether you agree with it or not, there's good and bad in everything.
Yeah.
With the content and algorithm that's shared with the what I think they're incredible. I just think you would never meet somebody and think they can do all these, you know. And it's I love storytelling. I love videos. I don't have to be interested, okay, in things. I love hearing about people's passion and storytelling for stuff.
Here's the interesting thing for me, Sam. The bit that TikTok does really well is, you know, the great phrase, I was going to write you a short letter, but I didn't have the time, so I wrote you a long letter instead, is a really great phrase, because actually trying to communicate a point in the most concise way possible is actually a big challenge. So like TikTok forces you to do that to a certain extent, I'd imagine.
And you've got qualified practitioners on there that are giving legitimate people. Obviously, you'd have to look at it, but there are people that are legitimately sharing really constructive, important content. And you've got, I mean, what I do is I save videos, Chris. And when I'm getting ready in the morning, short form videos for about up to 30 seconds, that is, I think, where we're heading. Short form videos that are informative, that's going to enable you to, you know, develop your resources.
Well, I don't know if any of our interview today we're going to be able to cut into 20 seconds. We'll have to wait and see what Raz does with it. But I've loved talking to you today. Thank you for sharing so much of your time.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.